Hi everyone, I'm Ayaz and I'm currently a PhD student at UC Davis. I'm working on a project to build trusted execution environments for high-performance computing centers, and in this talk I'll provide a brief overview of our work. This project is a collaboration between UC Davis and the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. High-performance computing is moving away from traditional modeling and simulation to large-scale computational problems, which often involves large data sets. And these data sets can be sensitive, thus raising security concerns from both external and internal threats. This sometimes also leads to a mistrust between the compute and the data provider and the users of the HPC resources as well, and this might lead to a risk versus data hosting trade-off. The secure environments, if they exist anywhere today, are usually not very user-friendly. In contrast, the use of hardware-based trusted execution environments can provide a usable compute model, which can also guarantee security from other users or untrusted components in the HPC system. Examples of trusted execution environments include Intel's SGX, ARM's TrustZone, AMD's SEV, and emerging research platforms like RISC-V's Keystone. The threat model we care about in this project assume that the HPC system administrators are not trusted and the host operating systems and hypervisors are not trusted as well. We assume very simple physical attacks are within the scope. Similarly, FPGAs, GPUs, dedicated ASICs are also considered. A cartoon on the bottom of this slide shows how these fit into the threat model we are considering. Now, in order to explain that why current Ts are not suitable for HPC, we'll look at a few observations we had while studying the current Ts deeply. The first observation we had is that the threat model of current Ts is generally not a good fit for HPC. In order to understand this, we can have a look at the cartoon in this slide, which presents a very simplistic view of a dual-node HPC system. The The block bordered in green is generally the focus of current Ts. The purple block here in this slide, it refers to the I/O devices, which also include GPUs, FPGAs, and other accelerators. And they are heavily integrated in HPC systems today to offload certain applications or parts of applications to those processing elements. And these processing elements are also generally not considered by the current Ts. HPC applications, they rely on runtimes like MPI, as most of these applications are large and scale across multiple nodes. However, HPC centers, which also have very high-speed interconnects, like InfiniBand, between multiple nodes and support very high bandwidths, they usually don't have good support of security in the network. And moreover, as the current MPI applications, they heavily use RDMA-like protocols, which are one-sided communication protocols. These raise new security threat because of this one-sided communication nature. And finally, there is no idea of a multi-node trusted execution environment in current Ts, and it is not clear that how the issues of secure boot, remote attestation, and single root of trust would be handled when multiple nodes and other accelerators are involved in a computation. The second observation we had in this work is that the programming model of current Ts is not a good fit for HPC. The current Ts either require recompilation or large changes in applications, which becomes a big problem for HPC, as most of the applications use third-party libraries. Similarly, the programming model might sometimes require the use of virtual machines, which can also become a big performance overhead for HPC applications. So our third observation is related to the performance overhead of the current trusted execution environments. And we actually performed a very detailed benchmarking study of the current Ts and found out that the performance overhead can be significant, especially for memory intensive and IO intensive workloads. And in the next few slides, we'll look deeply at these results. So the figure here in this slide shows AMD SEV's performance overhead on an AMD Naples platform when compared to the untrusted execution for a variety of HPC workloads. And we found out that the performance overhead of SCV is mainly because of default NUMA allocation, most of which goes away with interleaved NUMA allocation. And this default NUMA allocation, or the first touch allocation policy, basically allocates all memory on a single NUMA node, as SCV requires memory to be locked when it is being allocated. And this lock is needed because SCV relies on the physical address of a page to encrypt it. However, applications can also show some performance overheads, mainly because of virtualization, which is needed by SCV's programming model. For example, BLAST N, which is highlighted in this figure, it shows high overhead mainly because of virtualized disk I/O operations. We also observed that Intel's SGX shows huge performance slowdowns, and that is mainly because of enclave page cache faults. Enclave page cache fault refers to the faults in the secure memory of SGX, which is limited in size. Also, workloads under SGX show poor multi-threaded scaling, which also leads to this performance implication of workloads under SGX. And finally, we observed that the current Ts are not suitable for applications which scale across multiple nodes. And the figure in this slide shows a bandwidth comparison of execution of an MPI microbenchmark on a dual node AMD SCV based system at Cloud Lab. And the current Ts that don't support secure communication across nodes. So relying on naive solutions like VPN can incur huge slowdowns as shown in the figure. Even when no VPN is used, only the use of SCV shows reduction in bandwidth compared to unsecure execution due to extra copies that are needed to untrusted buffer to perform I/O in case of SCV. So finally, I'll quickly talk about our approach to tackle this problem. So we are basically relying on the unique features of HPC applications to design an HPC-centric T. And some of these features can be leveraged for a better design, while others might pose new constraints on the design of a trusted execution environment. So we use an open source T called Keystone, which is a RISC-V based trusted execution environment as a baseline for our studies. This slide provides an approximate overview of an HPC-centric T design for a single node. Red blocks in this cartoon are not trusted components. Green blocks refer to the trusted components. Blue blocks refer to sensitive application. Shim in this cartoon refers to a shim layer which intercepts syscalls of sensitive applications. Device manager verifies and manages the protection of memory which is accessed by devices. Encryption can be optionally implemented in the hardware using a memory encryption engine. So the intercepting of syscalls using a shim allows us not to trust the OS and still use it for resource management stuff. Sensitive applications are kept isolated using a RISC-V primitive called PMP or physical memory protection. Device manager, which is actually part of the security monitor, which is the base of a Keystone trusted execution environment, is responsible for verifying the devices, which also include accelerators and GPUs. So device manager is responsible for verifying the devices that want to access the memory of a sensitive application and allowing them to access the memory. Encrypting trusted memory, it further protects the memory from OS and physical attacks. So in summary, in this project, we plan to redesign Ts for HPC, and for this purpose, we are relying on academic Ts as a baseline and using an architectural simulation using tools like Gem5 to perform a design space exploration to come up with an optimal design which can fulfill all of the aforementioned requirements. I'm available at the email address shown in this slide for any questions you might have related to this project. Thank you.